In February 2025, a quiet Georgia community woke up to a literal nightmare. James and Kristen Brock were found shot and murdered in their bed while their two young daughters were asleep in their bedrooms. At first, investigators searched for a mysterious intruder, but as the days turned into weeks, the case took a horrifying turn that no one in Carroll County could have ever imagined. This is the story of faith, family, and betrayal in a case that shocked church members, neighbors, and the entire true crime community when investigators pointed to someone inside the home. We're going to dive into everything that we know so far, so get ready, you guys, because this is truly a shocking case that is currently unfolding. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and leave me a comment down below for any case suggestions that you have. All right, guys, let's get started. Kristen and James Brock were a well-loved couple in a rural part of Carroll County, Georgia. Kristen was described as bubbly and had a warm, outgoing personality. James was known to be a total jokester and someone who could make anybody laugh. The family moved to the area in August 2024, but despite being new, they jumped right in and became active members of Carrollton's Catalyst Church and their community. Both Kristen and James had previous relationships with children, plus one young daughter together. Kristen was the mother of Sarah Grace Patrick, who is a 17-year-old from her prior marriage, as well as a son from that marriage as well. After Kristen's divorce from Sarah's father, she married James Brock, and together they had a young daughter who was just 5 years old at the time of the murders. James Brock also had an older son, Tristan, from a previous relationship, making him Sarah's stepbrother. So, the Brock-Patrick household was a beautiful, large, blended family. They attended church as a unit and were known to be deeply kind-hearted and selfless people who were always willing to lend a helping hand to anyone in their community or their church. Sarah Grace Patrick, as the oldest daughter, was seen by many people as your typical polite teenager. Friends, family, and pastors all later described her as a devout young woman who had no prior history of trouble. She even made the personal decision to be baptized after the family joined Catalyst Church. Those close to Sarah describe her as respectful, patient, and incredibly kind. Many in the family say that Sarah hurting someone simply isn't in her nature or her character. Living at home with her mother, stepfather, and little sister, Sarah's day-to-day seemed to be a typical life of a teenager in a southern quiet community. She helped out with her sister and would even babysit other children at their local church. There didn't seem to be any red flags in her behavior, according to her father, Daniel Patrick, who is actively involved in her life. They lived in a single-story home on Carrollton-Tyus Road. Violent crime was unheard of in this area. Kristen worked in the community, and James was actually managing his own health challenges at the time. He had survived a major heart surgery and was reportedly awaiting a heart transplant to address the ongoing cardiac issues that he was having. Despite James's health concerns, family and friends say that the couple remained optimistic and excited about their future. They seemed truly happy in their marriage and devoted to all of their children. But this picture-perfect blended family forever changed. On Thursday, February 20th, 2025, something unimaginable happened. At approximately 5 or 6 a.m. on the morning of February 20th, the Brox's youngest daughter woke up. She wandered into her parents' bedroom like any other child would, likely expecting to find them getting ready for the day. Instead, the child found a scene of horror. Kristen and James Brock were found unresponsive, covered in blood, having suffered fatal gunshot wounds in their bedroom. The little girl's screams and cries alerted her big sister Sarah, who rushed into the master bedroom to a sight that no teenager should ever have to see. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Sarah Grace Patrick immediately called 911 to report that her mother and stepfather had been killed. On that frantic 911 call, Sarah stated that they had just found their parents and that someone must have broken in and shot them. The Carroll County Sheriff's Office dispatched deputies and emergency medical responders to the residence on the 1500 block of Carrollton-Tyus Road at about 7 o'clock in the morning. First responders arrived to the horrifying scene. By mid-morning on February 20th, 2025, news of the double murder began to spread all throughout their community. Sheriff's deputies secured the property with crime scene tape, and Carroll County investigators started processing the crime scene, treating the house as an active homicide site. Photos taken that morning showed at least a half a dozen police cars surrounding the single-story home. Sheriff's investigators worked quickly that day to gather as much evidence as they could so that they could begin piecing together a timeline. The time of death was soon estimated to be very early that morning, before dawn. A later affidavit for Sarah's arrest would pinpoint that the murders occurred sometime around 1:30 in the morning on February 20th. During that window, no neighbors remembered seeing or hearing anything unusual, and there were also no reports of barking dogs or alarms going off. It was as if a phantom had come and gone in the night. Within hours of the discovery, word reached James and Kristen's extended families. Kristen's family was absolutely devastated and confused. Who could have killed Kristen and James Brock, and why? There was no immediate answer for law enforcement. That same day, February 20th, 2025, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office launched a full-scale homicide investigation. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood on foot, asking if anyone had security camera footage or if anyone had noticed strange vehicles in the area or anything else off that night. Several interviews were conducted on February 20th and the 21st with the neighbors, friends, and family to gather any leads. The immediate aftermath also involved state and federal resources. Given the shocking nature of this crime, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, yes guys, that same one that we've talked about a few times, and the FBI were consulted for the technical assistance and forensic support. Now let's talk about the crime scene findings. When deputies arrived at the Brock residence, they discovered a shocking crime scene. Kristen and James Brock were found lying in their bed, deceased from clear gunshot wounds. Blood had soaked into the bedding and spattered the headboard and walls, which was evidence of a close-range shot that ended their lives. The couple's wounds were clearly fatal, and first responders couldn't do anything to save them, but they did confirm that both victims were beyond help. Investigators secured the master bedroom while taking pictures of the positions of the bodies and the surrounding evidence. James was found on his back while Kristen was slumped to one side. These positions suggested that they had been shot while sleeping, or maybe just as they were waking up, with no signs of a struggle like defensive wounds or any other chaos in the room. This supported the theory that the attack was fast, catching the victims completely off guard in their sleep. No firearm was found on the scene. Given the fact that both victims were shot at close range, investigators had to consider if this could have been a scenario where one spouse killed the other and then themselves. This was quickly dispelled, though. The weapon was not located on scene, which would lead them to believe that it was a double homicide. Without a gun present, the only logical conclusion was that an outside shooter had to have come in, killed the couple, and left with the firearm. This meant that the murderer was on the loose. The physical evidence collected in the bedroom included several spent shell casings and bullets. Neighbors did not report hearing any gunfire, which meant that a small caliber or firearm with a suppressor could have been used. It could also be that the distance between the homes and the time of night may have prevented anyone from hearing that, though. Investigators also looked at the points of entry to the house. We've already touched on this, but they found the back sliding door slightly left open. There were no obvious signs of forced entry like broken locks or shattered glass, so this raised an unsettling question. Did the killer enter through an unlocked door, or was this someone that the victims already knew and they let them in? Given that the murder likely happened in the middle of the night, it's unlikely that the victims let anyone in at that hour. Instead, the open door implied that either the intruder found a way in without breaking anything, or that someone with a key could have entered. The lack of forced entry immediately hinted that the crime may have been an inside job or committed by someone that was already familiar with the home. However, the investigators didn't jump to any conclusions. They dusted the doorknobs and the entry areas for fingerprints and tested for any foreign DNA at the scene. Because Sarah and her sister lived there, their fingerprints and DNA would be expected to be all throughout the home, complicating these results even further, though. Beyond the bedroom, the rest of the house appeared completely undisturbed. The living room, kitchen, and other areas were neat and showed no signs of theft. The couple's wallets, jewelry, and electronics were all still there. Kristen's purse hadn't even been touched, so this further indicated that robbery couldn't have been a motive, so it had to have been a home invasion of some type. It looked as if someone just came in with a singular purpose to kill the Brocks and nothing more. For detectives, that dramatically narrowed down the possible motives. At this point, it had to be personal, like revenge or jealousy or some family domestic dispute, rather than a random burglary gone wrong. Sheriff's investigators carefully photographed and collected all physical evidence. This included the bedding and clothing for gunshot residue or GSR, and any trace evidence like fibers or hairs or shoe prints. If the shooter had tracked throughout the house, they might have left a footprint on the hard floor somewhere or maybe even outside. Officers did note that the ground outside was soft from recent rains, and they looked for any footprints or tire tracks near the home's entrance, but nothing was announced publicly on that. Sarah Grace and her 6-year-old sister were both interviewed on the day of the murders. The The younger child said that she woke up and found mommy and daddy not waking up. Sarah gave a more detailed story, though. She told investigators that she had slept through the night and didn't hear anything unusual until she heard her little sister scream. She described discovering the gruesome scene and insisted that she had no idea who could have done this to them. Sarah mentioned that her mother and stepfather had no enemies and that everybody loved them. Sarah added that she found an open door, speculating that someone came into the house and shot her parents brutally while she and her sister were there. Investigators found it odd that the teen could sleep through multiple gunshots at close range, but I guess it wasn't impossible. Fear, shock, or heavy sleep might explain it, but the 6-year-old apparently didn't wake up from the time of the gunshots either. Evidence from the victims' bodies also began to guide the investigation. The position and nature of their wounds implied that the shooter likely had stood near the foot of the bed or to the side, firing down at the victims. An arrest warrant affidavit later suggested that the crimes happened back to back, but gave slightly different times for each. James Brock's death was listed at 1:32 a.m. and Kristen's was listed at 1:37 a.m. This could mean that one victim may have stirred or reacted moments before being killed, or maybe just a documentation oversight, but either way, the medical examiner's initial findings indicated that both James and Kristen died very quickly from their wounds, likely within moments of being shot. There were no signs from either victim that they had been moved or tried to crawl away, reinforcing that they were attacked in a prone position or on their back and completely defenseless. Investigators from the Sheriff's Major Crimes Unit, led by investigator TJ Repetto, began developing a list of initial leads. They put together a roster of anyone that might have had issues with the Brock family. This list was short. Deputies spoke to the nearest neighbors, and one said that late at night, he thought that he saw car headlights briefly in the distance, but he didn't think anything of it at the time. Another neighbor mentioned that one of the Brock's doors, possibly the back door, had been seen open earlier that morning. That open door suggests a possible point of exit for the killer. During the initial investigation phase, though, crime lab technicians tested the victim's hands for any gunshot residue to see if either victim had fired a gun, perhaps in self-defense, or killed the other and then themselves. As expected, those tests came back negative. Neither Kristen nor James had any GSR on their hands, confirming that they hadn't handled a firearm during that incident whatsoever. The killer, on the other hand, almost certainly would have had GSR on them right after the shooting. One absence at the scene was any clear sign of the killer's identity. There was no note left behind, no graffiti or symbol. The crime scene was eerily clean of clues beyond the bodies and the bullets. They truly needed a break, like a fingerprint or a witness who saw a suspicious person or vehicle flee, or forensic results from the autopsies to point them in a direction. On February 22, 2025, the Brock and Patrick families made a plea through the media for anyone with information to please come forward. Kristen's relatives even offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to an arrest, desperate to see justice for their loved ones. At that point in the timeline, nobody could have had a clue of what was to come. Some wondered if it could have been a random home invasion or maybe someone with a grudge against the family, but no obvious suspects emerged immediately. The autopsies of Kristen and James Brock were a crucial piece of the investigation, though. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation's medical examiner performed the autopsies within a day of the murders, and their findings confirm what was clear at the scene. Both victims died of multiple gunshot wounds, and the manner of death was clearly homicide. Each of the Brocks sustained fatal gunshot injuries. It's highly probable that each was a shot at least once in the head or upper body, given how quickly they passed away and at point-blank range. There were no reports of the victims being transported to a hospital because they were clearly deceased at the scene from unsurvivable injuries. The absence of defensive wounds on their bodies, as noted by the medical examiner, strongly supports that the theory was that they were shot in their sleep or in a groggy state, never even having a chance to fight back or even raise their hands to defend themselves. Ballistics analysis of the recovered bullets and fragments determined the caliber and possibly the size and type of the firearm, and then they were run through the ballistics database. No hits were found, meaning that this gun had never been tied to any known incidents. The absence of the gun remains a significant issue, though. Finding it could officially link the killer to the crime through ballistic matching. The medical examiner also looked for stippling or powder burns around the wounds. Stippling can indicate how close the muzzle was to the body when fired. If the shots were from a moderate distance, like let's say several feet, there might have been little to no stippling on the skin. If contact or near contact shots had occurred, the examiner would find deposits or searing of the wounds. The lack of mentioning this suggests that they may not have been present, reinforcing that the shooter likely fired from at least a few feet away. Standard autopsy protocol in suspicious deaths includes a toxicology screening, as always. Both Kristen and James had samples of blood and other fluids tested for drugs, alcohol, and other substances, but the toxicology report came back clean. Neither victim was under the influence of any type of substance at the time of their death, and that could have incapacitated them, so this was ruled out. This is an important detail because that means that they were likely in their normal sleep state when attacked, not sedated or unconscious for some other reason. If an outside killer had somehow covertly drugged them, it didn't show up in toxicology. The clothing that Kristen and James were wearing was examined for any foreign fibers or DNA that might have transferred from the perpetrator as well. If the killer touched the bodies, say to maybe make sure that they were dead, or if there was any kind of brief confrontation, they might leave touch DNA or hair. Given that Sarah and the little sister lived in the home and likely had their DNA all over the house, any DNA evidence had to be interpreted cautiously here. Investigators did collect DNA swabs from family members for comparison, though. That way, if an unknown profile had turned up, then they could rule that out because they would know the family's profile, if that makes sense. So far, there has been no report of an unknown DNA profile. The medical examiner's report, completed and forwarded to detectives, concluded that Kristen and James Brock were both killed by homicide by gunshot wounds. Knowing the victims were asleep and defenseless made detectives ask, who would have the opportunity and access to kill them at that hour? Who could enter the house quietly? As forensic analysis progressed, suspicion naturally gravitated towards those who were closest to the victims and who also had knowledge of the home's layout and routines. The idea that their daughter, Sarah Grace, could be involved was difficult for the community to fathom at that point. It would take a combination of forensic data with digital and behavioral evidence over the following months that ultimately shined the spotlight right on Sarah. Sarah Grace Patrick's behavior was, on the surface, relatively normal for a heartbroken daughter, but some believed her actions were unusual. In the days immediately following the deaths of her mother and her stepfather, Sarah seemed genuinely distraught and shocked, as any 17-year-old would have been. She and her 6-year-old sister went to live with relatives because the Brock home was an active crime scene and obviously was not a place for children to be staying. Investigators and family friends at the time all reported that Sarah was constantly crying, unable to sleep, and deeply grieving. Sarah was very vocal on social media about her grief too. Over the weeks following the murders, Sarah took to TikTok and other platforms to mourn her parents. She posted many videos and pictures of Kristen and James with sad music, expressing how much she missed them. In these TikToks, Sarah referred to James as the best bonus dad ever and thanked him for the life lessons that he taught her. She talked about her late mother saying, quote, "I never once thought to imagine y'all not being here. I didn't have a single clue how much I needed y'all until now," end quote. These heartfelt posts gained sympathy from viewers because it seemed like Sarah was truly a grieving daughter trying to cope with an unimaginable loss. One especially striking moment came about 2 weeks after the murders at the joint memorial service for Kristen and James Brock. The service was held at Catalyst Church and was so packed that it was literally only standing room available. They were loved by so many people. On stage, Sarah delivered an emotional eulogy that left the crowd in tears. She said, quote, "I just want to say goodbye, since we never got the chance to. Everything we went through does not define what kind of person you were or what kind of mother you were," end quote. Sarah hinted at typical mother-daughter ups and downs, but still praised her mom's character. She thanked James for being a great stepdad and spoke about her regret for not appreciating them enough while they were still alive. The congregation wept with her. As weeks turned into months after the services, some of Sarah's other actions continued to raise concern, though. Sarah appeared unusually eager to generate public attention for the case. On the surface, this could be seen as a desperate attempt to get her family justice, but the methods that she chose were interesting. In April 2025, Sarah reached out to a TikTok personality named Ophelia Nichols, who is a well-known public figure. In a private message on April 16th, Sarah wrote to Nichols, quote, "Mama Tot, I need a mama bad right now. I'm going through it," end quote, seeking comfort from the influencer who often mentors young followers dealing with tragedy. This message didn't initially set off alarm bells, though. Mama Tot later said that she receives many of these types of messages, and at the time, she wasn't even aware of Sarah's full story. It's what happened next that truly shifted the narrative, though. On June 4th, 2025, about 4 months after the murders, a true crime TikTok creator who goes by allegedly reportedly, whose first name is Janice, received an unexpected direct message. The message came from a TikTok user named Sarah Grace. It said, "Look up Brock case." Janice was confused. In a reply, the user added, "They were my parents, and out of nowhere, on a random Thursday night in February, someone came in my house with me and my 5-year-old sister and shot my parents brutally, leaving them for me and my little sister to wake up to." This message shocked Janice. The idea that the victim's own daughter was reaching out to her about covering the story was a first. Janice expressed her condolences and agreed to look into it. The following day, Sarah messaged Janice again, this time with a suggestion that struck Janice as oddly excited. Sarah wrote that if Janice covered the story on TikTok, she thought that it would be a really big hit. She even noted that so far, only one person had posted about it. Sarah also offered inside information saying, quote, "Plus, I can give you intel, just I can't give you anything that could break the case. That's what the cops told me," end quote. Okay, if you had received messages like this, tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. I think I would have felt exactly the same way that Janice did. This seems so bizarre. Janice, who later shared these messages with multiple media outlets, admitted that in hindsight, certain things felt really off. At the time, though, Janice continued on to do exactly what Sarah wanted. She began posting about the Brock case on TikTok. As soon as Janice's first TikTok video about the unsolved murders went up, the user Sarah Grace was all in the comment section responding to other viewers and their speculations. In one comment, someone wondered if the killer might have been someone that the Brocks knew. Sarah Grace replied, quote, "Most definitely was because they knew the house," end quote. Another comment asked about how the couple was killed, and Sarah Grace confirmed that the couple had been shot, which granted it was publicly known by then, but her confirmation still stood out as really strange. Janice later told reporters that it felt like she was digitally reliving the crime by constantly engaging and adding details in the online comment section. Sarah not only shared the story, she kept interacting with the content. I don't know about you, but if I had been traumatized after finding my parents, I don't think I would be obsessively binging content and engaging with it. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on that. She emailed Janice a detailed description of what she claimed to have witnessed upon finding the crime scene, basically narrating the horror and shock from her perspective. At the time, Janice just thought Sarah was a traumatized teenager trying to process her grief by talking about it with someone. But after Sarah's eventual arrest, Janice realized that that behavior seemed far more like someone almost too eager or excited to talk about the case. Meanwhile, Sarah's TikTok account also posted more tribute videos and messages mourning her parents. To her friends and followers, it looked like she was keeping her parents' memory alive and pleading for justice. On some videos, she wrote captions like, "I miss you, Mom," with a broken heart emoji and video montages of Kristen's smiling photos. On others, she included hashtags about seeking justice for the Brock family. This online activity gained her a fair amount of attention, and the case got a boost in exposure due to the social media buzz locally. Investigators were aware of Sarah's social media posts. They didn't publicly discourage against her posting, but behind the scenes, they monitored them. During the period of March through May 2025, Sarah bounced between living arrangements, which wasn't unusual given the fact that her home once again was a crime scene. She lived with different family members and moved all over the place in the months after the murders. She spent some time with her biological father, Daniel or DJ Patrick, and his side of the family. She also stayed with family friends like Caitlin O'Keefe, and she didn't stay with any of the Brock's relatives. During these travels, investigators kept tabs on her as both a witness and, increasingly behind the scenes, a person of interest. Among the extended family, not everyone was entirely convinced of Sarah's innocence or behavior, though. James Brock's family harbored uneasy feelings. James's adult niece, Kristen Duda, later revealed that some family members had suspicions even prior to Sarah's arrest. They struggled with these suspicions because Sarah had always seemed sweet and soft-spoken, but there were comments that James himself had made while he was alive that began to haunt them. According to Duda, James had repeatedly cautioned that she is not the Sarah that everybody knows. The real Sarah behind the scenes was very different, referring to his stepdaughter. At the time, relatives didn't press on what he meant by that because teenagers can be a lot, but after the murders, that cryptic warning ate at them. Now, this meant that James might have been dealing with serious issues with Sarah behind closed doors that nobody else was really aware of. Through late spring 2025, Sarah was treated as another victim of this crime. She enjoyed the support of her church, friends, and especially her biological family. Her father, DJ, was really protective of her. He took her into his home, and when online rumors began hinting at the possibility of Sarah's involvement, Daniel defended his daughter. Investigators needed to focus on the most common angles, so they looked at James and Kristen's backgrounds. Both had previous marriages. Could an ex-spouse maybe be involved? Kristen's divorce from Daniel Patrick, Sarah's dad, had happened years earlier and seemed pretty amicable. Daniel had since remarried and had a stable family life elsewhere. He was also physically elsewhere at the time of the crime with an alibi. James's ex or any past relationship issues were also not significant. No evidence pointed to anyone outside of the home. Detectives also considered whether the crime could be maybe a contract killing or an act of revenge, maybe unrelated to family. They looked into James's past employment and friendships to see if he had had any disputes with anyone, plus Kristen. They found nothing. There were no debts, there were no feuds. The Brocks, being new to the area, hadn't even had time to make enemies there. Church members said that the couple was kind and giving. It was baffling to them. Investigators pulled the phone records of Kristen, James, and Sarah for the night of the murders. Sarah's digital footprint in particular caught the investigators' interest, though. What websites did she visit? Was she Googling in the days and weeks leading up to the crime? Who was she texting? Did she communicate with anyone about a plan? The sheriff's office has not revealed the specifics, but later they did say that there was evidence connected with her digital footprint that led to charging Sarah with murder. Considering Sarah's age of 17 and being tech-savvy, she likely had a smartphone and possibly also a laptop. If she researched anything related to the crime beforehand, those logs could have been recovered with warrants. Investigators also conducted countless interviews. They re-interviewed Sarah multiple times throughout the spring, searching for any inconsistencies or new details. In a lengthy interrogation over the course of 4 hours, sometime before her arrest, Sarah was questioned intensely. According to Sarah's father, she maintained her innocence throughout and stuck to her story that she had no idea who the killer was. We know from public statements from the prosecution that Sarah did not immediately tell them what happened, hinting that she may have withheld something from them. Whether that refers to a lie during the initial questioning or maybe a secret that she kept for months, we're not exactly sure. But law enforcement felt that she wasn't being fully truthful from the very beginning, which, of course, is another major red flag. Investigators spoke to family and friends for the insight into the family dynamics, though. Some reports and social media chatter, unconfirmed, suggested that there had been discipline issues in the home. One rumor was that Kristen punished Sarah by taking away her phone, as most parents do, and alluded to a prior abuse case involving some of the children, which could be misinformation because I wasn't able to find any information online to corroborate this. One possible angle was an inheritance or financial gain. If Sarah's life was made difficult by her parents, could she have done this for money? The Brocks weren't known to be wealthy people, but they might have had an insurance plan or property that she might have known of. It seems more likely that this is an emotional or psychological motive like rebellion, anger, or maybe even desire of freedom from her parental rules, though. On July 7, 2025, a Carroll County judge signed an arrest warrant for Sarah Grace Patrick on multiple charges including malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault for both victims. The next day, July 8, 2025, sheriff's deputies contacted Sarah's father and notified him about the warrant for his daughter's arrest, and her father brought her right in. According to DJ Patrick, he didn't hesitate to bring Sarah to the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office confirmed that Sarah Grace Patrick turned herself in at the Carroll County Jail the morning of July 8, 2025. She was immediately taken into custody, processed, and booked on 2 counts of malice murder, which in Georgia implies intent to kill, 2 counts of felony murder, and 2 counts of aggravated assault, and 2 weapon charges. Sarah was accused of being the person who shot and killed Kristen and James Brock. Many in the family and community could not believe that the polite, devout teenager who had been so publicly heartbroken was now in handcuffs, accused of murdering her own mother and stepfather. The law enforcement community, however, stood firm on their case. When asked if there was a single piece of evidence that cracked it, officials hinted that it was the cumulative weight of many things, possibly including those TikTok messages and forensic data that built this case. As of September 2025, no one else has been charged. Even after Sarah's arrest, many insist on her innocence. Sarah's paternal grandfather, Dennis Nolan, or Kristen's father, openly supported his granddaughter. He attended her court hearings and told a reporter that he didn't think her being denied bond was right, saying he supports her and that the Brock family is angry and it shows. This family is truly divided. The Patrick Nolan side, so Sarah's blood relatives, supported Sarah, whereas the Brock side, James's relatives, believe that she's guilty. The arrest of 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick marked a major turning point, though, where the case transitioned from an unsolved mystery into a criminal prosecution. The steps after her arrest involved initial court appearances, bond hearings, and the convening of a grand jury to indict her on formal charges. The Carroll County Sheriff's Office announced that an arrest had been made in the double homicide case, confirming that the suspect was the victim's own daughter. Sarah was booked into the county jail, and a mugshot was taken showing a pale-faced teenage girl with red eyes, her blonde hair pulled back, staring blankly at the camera. This mugshot could not be further from the image that everyone has painted of her. Because of the severity of the charges and the fact that she was 17, Georgia law allows her to be tried as an adult. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below, though. This meant her name could be publicly released, which it was, and that her case would proceed in a superior court rather than juvenile court. Carroll County Jail kept Sarah segregated from the general population, held in isolation from the time of her arrest and still. This is both for her protection and to prevent any chance of her communicating with others about the case. Her defense attorney later mentioned her isolation to argue for an expedited trial, though. After about 6 weeks in custody, Sarah Grace Patrick had a bond hearing in Carroll County Superior Court. The prosecution, led by Assistant DA Michael Parrish, argued strongly against granting bond. The defense, representing Sarah, pleaded for her release on bail pending trial, citing her age, lack of criminal record, and support from some family. The bond hearing was described as an emotional 2-hour hearing. Several witnesses from both sides spoke. For the defense, supporters painted Sarah as a model teenager. Her pastor testified that she had been deeply involved in the church and even after incarceration had called him from jail to continue praying together. He talked about her regular attendance and the sincerity of her faith, saying, quote, "She didn't just show up on Sundays. She clearly found a place where she felt at home," end quote. Family and friends added that Sarah was gentle and had no prior criminal history or violent tendencies. Her grandfather, Dennis Nolan, did not take the stand, but he was present to lend his moral support. In interviews, he maintained that he doesn't believe that she could have done this. Even her father, Daniel's fiance, testified that Sarah had never been a problem when staying with them. The defense's pitch was that Sarah was not a flight risk or a danger, and that she should be allowed to await trial at her home with her family's support. The prosecution, however, presented a starkly different perspective. Prosecutor Parrish argued that Sarah posed a significant risk on multiple fronts. He pointed out that the circumstances of the crime were extremely violent. James's sister said, quote, "If the defendant can kill her own parents in such a violent manner, I fear for my own safety and the safety of my family and friends," unquote. This statement represents the community's fear. If she could do this to her parents, what could she do to anyone who crossed her path? They hadn't even found the gun. The prosecution emphasized the risk to witnesses, especially to the surviving young sister. They feared that if released, Sarah might attempt to influence or intimidate the 6-year-old sister, who is a crucial witness to this investigation. Parrish also raised the point that before her arrest, Sarah had been moving around frequently, staying with multiple people, which they argued could show a potential to flee or at least a lack of stability to ensure that she would appear in court. They talked about her contacting out-of-state TikTokers and having a growing internet presence as factors that also make flight much easier for her. During the hearing, members of the victims' families gave impact statements urging the judge to please keep Sarah in jail. James's son, Tristan Brock, spoke through tears. Tristan called his father his Superman and said that Sarah would absolutely attempt to flee rather than stand trial if given the opportunity. Sarah's supporters talked about fear too, fear for Sarah's well-being if she remained incarcerated, and insisted that she wouldn't harm anyone. Sarah was present in the courtroom, sitting with her defense attorneys. She was seen smiling and even hugging her attorneys. However, Sarah's composure cracked. She grew emotional and broke down weeping during parts of the hearing. To some, these tears were a sign of genuine remorse or sorrow, but to others, it was just an attempt to gain sympathy. Ultimately, Judge Hightower denied the bond. In his ruling from the bench, he cited 3 main concerns: flight risk, risk of influencing witnesses, and a danger to the community and family. He referenced the seriousness of the case and the valid fear expressed by relatives. Sarah would remain behind bars as she awaited trial. Dennis Nolan, her grandfather, was disappointed, but said to the press that he understood the other side's anger. Sarah was indicted on August 19, 2025. Judge Hightower tentatively set an arraignment date for September 22, 2025, and is eyeing a potential trial start date of January 5, 2026, so very soon. He stressed the need to prioritize the case since the defendant was in custody and in isolation for her own safety. At arraignment, scheduled for September 22nd, Sarah Grace Patrick will formally enter her plea. Knowing what we know now, do you guys think she's going to plead guilty or not? When this video goes up, the arraignment will be happening just a couple of days later, but I will keep you guys posted. Georgia law could allow them to seek life without parole. Sarah remains held at the Carroll County Jail without bond. She's now been incarcerated for about 2.5 months, and jail officials continue to keep her separate from the adult inmates for her safety, given that she is still under 18. Once she turns 18, she may be integrated with general population, but given the notoriety of her case, the jail might still opt to keep her segregated to prevent any issues with other inmates. Sarah's behavior in jail has been compliant and quiet. One jail source said that she spends a lot of time reading her Bible and other books. Her attorneys and occasionally her father visit her. In case you were wondering like I was, the 6-year-old sister is safe and being cared for by family. After the arrest, custody of the little girl was formally given to a close family member. She started first grade and is reportedly receiving counseling to help cope with the trauma. My heart breaks for that little girl. She lost her entire family in a moment and found her parents the way that she did. I'm relieved to hear that her guardians have prioritized therapy and taking good care of her. The countdown to trial has begun. Let me know if you guys want me to cover a part 2 of this case after the trial concludes, or maybe we could even do some lives together throughout the trial. Until the gavel comes down on a verdict, the story of Sarah Grace Patrick and the murder of her parents continues to be one of the most tragic chapters in Carroll County's history. I'm sending all of my love to Kristen, James, and their loved ones. Don't forget to weigh in the comments down below on trial coverage or a part 2. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for spending time with me today. Don't forget to drop our little secret handshake down in the chat, and if you're new, it's a blue butterfly. Have an amazing week, Nurses Orders. I'll see you guys next weekend.